Exhibit, you watching Move Faces TV.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Kids in the Room podcast.
Kids in the Room podcast.
That's right. That's right.
Brought to you by Move Faces TV. Let's go.
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Kids in the Room podcast. Today, we've got my friend Rooz on the podcast. We both had to come up with our, abbreviations of our name or shortened or nicknames, whatever you will. But yeah, it's great to have Rooz on the podcast today. Rooz, tell us, what's interesting about you, what's special about you. Tell us who you are.
So my name is Rooz, short for Roozbeh. I was born in Iran, and then we moved to the United States in 1986. And then I went to elementary school in the United States, and then I went back, and then I came back to the United States, and I've been in the States since 2000. I have 2 MBAs. And then I think I had my midlife crisis a little bit sooner than what's the average, 45, 50? Anyways, I had it at 36, 37 probably. I don't know. And that's 2018, 19, that's when it started happening. Yeah. And then I was not happy and satisfied with my career path, and not that I was not accomplishing. I was pretty good at what I was doing. Is that I'm gifted with ADHD as well, so maybe I should have said that first. And as someone that has ADHD, my ADHD was a lot of times getting in the way of me showing my full potential to people, and sometimes people saw it as a threat. They didn't understand it. So in 2019, I had kind of like my aha moment. I need to do something with life, and changed my whole trajectory. I went from working for someone to starting my own practice with the help of my wife, actually helping her rebrand her, going from just doing psychotherapy and therapy to doing psychotherapy. And I mean, she does that part of it. I do the coaching. So I decided to become a life ADHD coach, or ADHD life coach, whatever.
Oh, wow. That's all interesting, man. So you had like a midlife, or I don't know what to call it, early life crisis. I don't know. Yeah. How do we coin that?
Whatever you want. I mean, I call it an awakening. It was more of like, I need to make a difference. I need to make a difference in my life.
Yeah. It's all about making a difference.
Yeah. I was tired of doing the same thing over and over and not getting the results that I wanted. And I know I had the potential, but I know a lot of times my ADHD was getting in my way.
What do you think was getting in your way? Like, what do you mean? Like you said, like your ADD was getting in your way. Like what types of things were getting in your way? And in what ways, basically?
So from the time that I remembered, I was always told that I was hyperactive. Right, the word hyperactive was like he's a menace. It was like I remember literally like when I watched the first movie, Dennis the Menace, like when he's standing there, his hands are like going like this. Like just my mom would laugh. God rest her soul. She's like, "That's you. That's when you were a kid. You could not stand alone." I remember when I wanted to go to sleep, like my grandma had to hold my feet because I was always kicking. I had a hard time, not to strain. You know what I mean? I had a hard time just calming down. Restless mind, all over the place. You might see signs of it today. I jump from topic to topic, but excessive talking, right? I mean, if you might see it again today, but like this is a lot better version. I used to be a bad monologuer. I would just like talk, and people like, when is it our turn? Got diagnosed multiple times in life, and I never took it serious. I would take the meds, and either coworkers would make fun of me or the meds were not right. And I did some therapy, and I would just get a solution and move forward. And when it wasn't more of a solution, like I would get the understanding of what's happening in life and how I got there. And I thought I had it. And I was always craving approval and someone else to be my mentor. I remember when maybe for the next podcast that I do, I should have it to show people. I had approval for like 90% of the universities in California, UCLA, USC. And I mean, I'm talking about industrial engineering, chemical engineering, computer engineering, everything that you can imagine. But I went to Cal Poly because I found a professor there that I was looking as a mentor. Like mentor and having someone to guide me was always something that I craved, but I didn't know what I wanted from them, because when they would help, I would run away. I would feel that they're like being intrusive. They're telling me. Last time I got diagnosed was in 2016, which my therapist said that you got ADHD. I'm like, I know them. They said, well, what are you doing about it? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not doing anything. I'm here. My mom is passing away and I'm about to just go berserk. I'm falling apart. Long story short, to stay on track, after I became a coach, I found out that actually I'm not only ADHD, I'm what's called a combined ADHD. I have ADHD and inattentive, or what they used to call it back in the 80s, ADD. I have both of them. Difficulty waiting turns, frequent interruptions, definitely trouble paying attention. I would be the dreamer in the classroom. I remember like maybe even in middle school, I would take my G.I. Joes and sit there in the classroom, hiding it underneath the table, playing with them. Or we didn't have phones back then, but I would find something to write on or scribble. Quick temper, definitely. And then some inattentive, like, easily distracted, might seem disorganized, big time procrastinator. And then later on, when I became a coach, I learned another, symptom or challenge is like, you're a perfectionist. I'm like, what do you mean a perfectionist? I'm always making mistakes. So yeah, that's how the ADHD was getting in my way. I mean, the biggest one was the procrastination, lack of follow through, trouble following through. And then like even when my inattentiveness kicks in, I become shy, like I become defensive. It's kind of like one of my defense mechanisms, withdrawn behavior. And people might think that I'm like depressed, and no, I'm shy at the moment. But then at moments, I'll be the, John Travolta at Saturday Night Fever, dancing on the floor and being the crazy dude that is just jumping around and making everybody feel, have fun. So yeah, that's how the ADHD was at one point. As one of the podcasts I did is it was kind of my kryptonite. It was just, I didn't know what to do with it. And I keep throwing resources at it and I couldn't do anything.
That's interesting. And, like when you said you couldn't do anything, like you said you graduated from college, you got an MBA and et cetera, right?
Yeah.
So how did you pass that and, go through that with, all these difficulties?
No, I didn't cheat. I found a way to get it done. Now as an ADHDer, as a coach, I celebrate what I did. But if you talked to me back then, I would be ashamed. I wouldn't even, I would say it and I would be ashamed of it. I'm a verbal processor. So I would help I would talk and my wife would help me type. The processing speed of my brain and my typing is like, I'll mistype words I can't mind map. So I would say it. And then, back in the day, we didn't have text dragon or whatever right now, voice recognition and stuff like that. So the technology wasn't there. My technology was my wife. She had to sit in front of a computer and help me. I would say what I wanted to say and then draw it on the map. And I'm like, okay, this is what I mean. Now we would put it on paper. So it took more than when I graduated from college, I was always behind. I graduated high school with my parents, being on it, private tutors, summer school, whatever you can think. I mean, booster shot after booster shot, trying to make sure I get through. But when you get into college, it's a different thing because they're like, tag, you're it. We don't know engineering. And, they were expecting me to become an engineer. I miserably failed the first 2 years of university in Iran. It's some classes I would pass and some classes I couldn't retain the information, that the methods were too hard. But then I came to the States, straight A's. And then because the method of studying here is different, right? In Iran, they expect you to remember, calculus, the formulas and stuff like that. You can't use a calculator. Well, here the teacher was like, hey, you can use a calculator as long as you show me your work. You can do an open book. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I knew the process, but then again, the brain got caught up because one of the biggest challenges that ADHDers have as a coach, but this is one of my other areas that I work with as an executive function coach. When it comes to the executive function, my brain's executive function is a couple of years behind. Now I'm pretty sure it's a lot more because I didn't learn it at the time that I needed those skills. So my working memory, my processing of like information at the time was always behind. So when I got caught up with the regular university course, again, I started failing. I almost got kicked out. I had to change majors. It took another 3 years. So long story short, I think I graduated with my 2 MBAs in 2009. I think so. That's what it says over here. But it took more than your average, being in college for 4 years, multiple tries, multiple failures. But I, thank God, my parents, my wife, there was someone there that was acting like my executive function. They were kind of pushing me to go through. But then when you go into the workforce, it's different.
Right. So what happened? What were some of the things that happened once you got into the workforce?
Oh, everything. I mean, it's like I would go to a meeting and I would fall asleep. I would be sitting in the city council meeting. They're sitting there and doing planning, and I'm like the project engineer, or I'm the junior project manager or the purchasing manager, and I'm like snoozing. In college, they would laugh at it. The teacher would make a joke, everybody would laugh, or I would take the notes of someone else. Right? And the topic was boring for me. It's not interesting. I would get on the phone. I would get on Instagram or Facebook back in the day or stuff like that. So my focus was always somewhere else and not paying attention, not following through. That's where it started. Like all the stuff that somehow the scaffold that the family, the school had provided, as I got older, it became harder to manage, right? When you're in middle school, when you're in grade school, it's easy. Middle school, a little bit harder. High school, whoa. Like now I'm getting F's and D's and C's. This is a kid that used to get straight A's and A pluses. Like I would be, I learned English in 6 months, not knowing a single word. I had a call this morning with a new potential client. He asked me, "You speak English perfectly." I'm like, "Well, thank you. I'm humble." But he's like, "How did you learn? Did you know any English?" I'm like, "No, I came to the States. Nothing. Literally, this is a little memory from my childhood. This is what the teacher gave me for the first 2 months because I couldn't even write my name. I had to have it here. And it had my seat number. Talk about being dog tagged. That's how it was. Like words were written like I needed to go to the bathroom. It was a red card. I would raise it up. I couldn't speak English. Verbal processing, I'm great at it. But as I got older, it became harder. So I went to magnet school from 3rd to 5th grade. When I went back, I passed 5 grades, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4 grades, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th from March of 1990 to September 1990. I passed all of them, all in Farsi. And I didn't, my Farsi was not that great either. But when you get into high school, it changes. When you get into college, it changes, gets harder. And when there's not a scaffold, family is not there, they can't support you. It became very hard. And work was, it was a different beast. It was.
Wow.
And I had a very, let's put a shelf life. I hope none of my old coworkers feel bad about this, but I had a shelf life. Like I could last for 2 years, 3 years. And then it was like, oh, something is about to happen. I'm about to get fired. They're about to find out. I need to cut and run.
What do you mean? You said you had about a 12. You said what was it about a 2 or 3 year shelf life? Like, what do you think? What happened? Like, what do you mean?
Stuff would get caught up. I mean, the stuff that I was throwing in the bucket of I'll do it later, or the stuff that I forgot, the procrastination. But it would get caught up, or you would make so many errors that they're like you get red flagged, and either you get tired or they get tired, and you're like, nope, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm out.
Mm-hmm. So you would say that most of your life you had probably a problem like keeping jobs or roles.
Yeah. But like every job that I got at the beginning, I was successful because all the jobs that I got were in a way At the beginning, they would give me the autonomy to build it. I'm a creator. I like to build, right? So at the beginning, I was like, I would go in and I would be the department creator for procurement and purchasing. Oh, great. I like to do that. But then now when you get into mundane routines, cutting purchase orders, doing orders and stuff like that, oh man, that's when Rooz would start slipping.
So basically once you start doing like things that were kind of like mundane, that was repetitive, you kind of fell off.
Yeah. Kind of like when it's maintenance or like, your normal day to day answering emails and stuff that are boring, that are not interesting for me, that is not about creation. Oh, sorry about that. Should have not happened.
I think you're good. I can hear you. Someone calling you?
I apologize for this.
Yeah, no worries. Kuna Matata.
Oh God.
What is that, by the way?
Sorry about that.
What was that?
It's my phone that connects to the laptop to tell me like if I'm getting a call, but it was on Do Not Disturb, but apparently it went through.
Ah, amazing technology. So basically what happened is like you've pretty much lived your life with, ADD or ADHD, and you've had a hard time actually, keeping a job. It's also caused many other issues in your life in general. But you've managed to graduate college, but you did have a lot of support in order to do so. You've had to kind of manage your entire life around ADD or ADHD. And you would probably say that was rather difficult. And then you also said that you got into a early life crisis in your late or mid 30s. What does that all look like? An early life crisis, if you will.
I was not getting satisfied. And when you said, and I'm not correcting you, I just wanted to be clear.
Sure.
Because when you said could not hold a job, I could hold it. I would just job hop, right? I was not getting fired. I never got let go. And the first time I got let go, it was very shocking because I was always afraid of it. But and that's when the midlife stuff started happening. Is like, the crisis started happening where I started, like, when you get older, like you get a house, you get your own car, you got credit bill, you're having a kid, life is happening, you go travel the world. It's like, what's next, right? And I was working for an organization. I created it from ground up, and after it became mundane, this was the only job that I kind of lasted a little bit more than everywhere else, is because I was given the autonomy to do whatever I wanted. Like the person that was in charge, he really believed in me. And it was working for my ADHD because he would not micromanage. Every time I started getting micromanaged, that's when I started running away. Like I was like, nope, not having this. And it was like, what am I doing? I'm not satisfied here. Like, in 2016, when my mom was passing, we knew she had cancer for 10 years. For 9 years, I ran away with it. I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to face it. I didn't want to talk about it. I had a hard time even sometimes going and seeing her. I started questioning as like, what am I doing? I'm like, I'm putting everything first for work, but I'm not getting satisfied from it. I'm not happy there. And that's when that kind of like, and I remember actually I was talking to this gentleman earlier today. He asked me, tell me your story. I'm like, my supervisor actually took me to a dinner, nice steak dinner, by the way. He's like, I'm leaving. You need to find something. I'm like, take me. He's like, dude, you're sitting in front of the deputy director of purchasing for the city of Los Angeles. Go and introduce yourself. Get a job. You got 2 MBAs. I'm like, I'm done. I don't want to do that anymore. He's like, well, then what do you want to do? And right there, I felt like something is just like stuck. Like I just like felt like a ton of weight just like landed on my shoulder. What do I want to do? Because I was always told what to do. You're going to become an engineer or a doctor. And then when I came to the States, you can become a lawyer. But you had to be successful. That's what success was. You didn't become an engineer, you're going to get 2 MBAs, or at least one. But the second one was just like, oh, it's easy, I'll get a second. And it was the first time like I was given the option of like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't know. I was like, just take me. He's like, well, I don't need a director. I mean, somebody to do purchasing. I'm like, I'll do anything. He's like, you want to be a janitor? I mean, it's a one-man show right now. I don't need the need of anyone. I started doing job interviews. I would go to a job interview. I couldn't even tell them what I want to do. Like, just the focus was not there. And then when my mom left, I had a whole mental health kind of crisis breakdown, without getting in because there's legal stuff there. Long story short, what happened is I couldn't even apply for a job. Like, I would apply for jobs and I go to interviews and I would start crying in the middle of the interview. Just, my mom had passed, by the way, but I was very emotional. I couldn't even focus. I couldn't even talk about my strengths, what I do, how I did it. And right after my daughter was born, I got a career coach. And I'm all about visual stuff. So she gave me, and I'm just showing you this because this is like something I've had on my desk. This is not what she gave me, but she gave me like a katana. Like, she gave me a tool that was very sharp, right? She gave me a tool to get a job, but she didn't help me find my career path. When I applied, when she gave me the tools, and it wasn't this, by the way, but I'm using this as a metaphor. When she gave it to me, I started applying, and believe it or not, Tav, I had like 6 interviews lined up, and I was like, whoa, choice paralysis, man. Like, which one do I choose? And of course, I chose the wrong decision. I didn't. I had to stop at there because actually around that time, my therapist had told me, dude, you need to get an executive function coach. You need to find someone to teach you planning, prioritization, learning to stop procrastinating, learn how to, manage your thought process, organization, like, basic stuff. I couldn't do it. And it's not like my parents were poor at teaching and they were not interested. I had goals, but I would give up on them. I was not flexible. Stress tolerance, horrible. I thought I was great at stress tolerance. Something would get a little bit in my way. I would like start pulling my hair. I would get angry. It was just miserable, but I didn't take it. I was like, I'll do it later. I think I talked to one person. I interviewed them, and I'm like, no, why do I want to spend that money on that? By the way, if I'm talking too much, let me know.
No. I'm just, I'm taking it all in. So you pretty much got a lot of, you went through a lot of ups and downs, a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
A lot of trauma also recently too, as well, going through a situation with your mom. And then, just a lot of, early life crisis, probably that also probably increased it, and just, really just kind of figuring out or thinking back to yourself, like, hey, what's going on? Where am I at? What am I doing? What's this all about? What's the meaning of anything? I think like anybody who's, I guess you would say someone who is self-aware of themselves starts, thinking in retrospect, starts thinking like, hey, what is this life? Where was that before? How can I move? How can I improve my life? Am I doing anything? Where am I going with this?
Yeah, it was a lot. And the trauma was not only like mom passing and stuff like that. Supervisors started becoming trauma too. And some of it were from childhood. My mom had OCD. So God rest her soul. Sometimes I joke around with my 6-year-old. I'm like, if grandma was around and she saw the way you were writing, she would yell and scream, and she would take the white out and the eraser. She would make you erase it. I had trauma from my mom. And again, I'm not talking ill about her, but this is like when I started understanding. Again, it's what my wife is a trauma specialist. She's a PTSD trauma specialist. She's a psychotherapist. The color of red, and by the way, you do not find a red pen in my room. My supervisor would print out my emails, come out and draw red lines under it and said, I don't understand this, or this is a mistake. You're a director. You're making us look bad. Those started becoming like bringing past trauma out. And as an ADHDer, you're already dealing with lack of self-confidence and believing in yourself. So then guess what happens? You already didn't have any faith in yourself. Like you're here and now you're below zero. It came to a point that like I would see a person that resembled Rooz. Let's just use Rooz as an example. Like he had a beard, black hair, black eyed. The name even started with R-O and it was Robert. When I would see them, I would freeze. Oh yeah. Like right now, I live in LA. Well, I live in Orange County. You want to believe it or not, I haven't been to one part of town because I have trauma from working at that location. I start hyperventilating. Now I've worked with some of that trauma. I went back to one of the companies that I had, a little bit hard time. And it wasn't them, it was just me. Right? And I went there. And actually, funny thing is, just side note, I met the CEO 2 months ago at the gym. I went up and I shook his hand. And he looked at me and he's like, I know you. I'm like, yeah, you let me go. And he is like, and yeah, I'm pretty sure he was baffled. I was like, what is this guy like? He's going to hit me? He's taller than me. And I'm like, thank you for doing that. And he is like, are you like, I'm like, you changed my life. 2 years later, 6 months later, I fell apart. I fell in a mental, I had 272-hour holes. And when I came out, I changed my life. But I appreciate you guys pushing me to that point. And thank God I had someone to catch me, right? I had a system, like, not everybody is. There was a voice that heard me that I was crying for help. And
So wait a minute. So you had, I want to take a step back for a second. So wait a minute. You kind of crashed. You went up to your old supervisor or manager or whatever it may be.
No,
CEO. Sorry. Yeah. So
it's a big Fortune. I don't want to.
Right.
It's a big company. Yeah.
So you went up to him basically and thanked him for, getting you how do you say it? You went up to him to thank him for letting you go. And why are you thanking him? Like what did he do? Like, how did he help you propel your life
because if I wasn't let go, I would still be content. I would still be working in procurement. Tav, I went to a job interview at the job after that. And I think like maybe the next week, that's when I started to have suicidal ideation. I went to a job interview, and this is a colleague that he's from my country. He went to the same college. Like we didn't know each other, but like, there was a lot of, hey homie, you got my back, I got your back. I come from Iran. You got an MBA, I got an MBA. You study supply chain. He asked me a couple of questions, and he said, "You're all over the place. Are you okay?" And I'm like, "I need to get a new job." And he says, "Why? Why do you like supply chain and procurement?" And I paused and I said, "I don't know." And he looked at me, he's like, "Is that the answer you really want to leave on the table?" And I walk away. And I'm like, and again, as a verbal processor, not good, but I literally turn around. I'm like, I don't know why I'm doing this, because my dad did it. And I never liked my dad in that field, right? And I feel so disconnected. Why am I, like, I was processing it verbally. Like I thought maybe he's my therapist, my mentor at that moment. And I said, I don't know. I shook his hand and I walked out. And I was like cold sweat, and I was like all over the place. And it was just that weekend was a very rough weekend.
Wow. So, I mean, what did you kind of do after that? I mean, like what did you, I mean, like, I guess I want to figure out kind of like, what are the next steps? Like, I get the point that, he came up to you and he was, a little bit like asking you a couple of questions about yourself and, made you think about a lot of different things. But what was next? How did that help you? How did that change you?
I mean, that wasn't a change, but it was triggers for me not being happy and realizing that I was like getting worse and worse. I was reading a book by Dr. Hallowell that was called Driven to Distraction. And I was listening to their audible, and constantly in that book is talking about people that have ADHD, but somehow they became great at it. And I was getting angrier and angrier. Like, okay, these people don't have a therapist. They were miserable for 30 years. They didn't know what ADHD is. I've known ADHD since my early 20s. I've been on meds all, like, majority of my life, on and off. I'm married to a freaking therapist. What's going on? And that's when it hit the wall. That's when I was like, okay, I'm gonna end it. I'm done. Meds are not working. Therapist is not working. So all of this is a lie. Like, it's just like, I'm just gonna become a loser. I'm just gonna be doomed. Like, all on, black and white thinking, all or nothing.
Wow. So you basically hit rock bottom, and you were just kind of like, all right, well, what you couldn't really diagnose what were the next steps and what was really wrong with you, or what you felt that you felt something was wrong with you. You felt uneasy.
I felt that it was maybe more than ADHD. I felt like there's something bigger. Like, I'm like literally like I'm a loser. Like, I'm just like the word loser constantly kept coming in my head. And I think my daughter was at that time like almost a years 1 year old, 1.5 or so. It was July, so June or July, June.
Yeah. What do you think their problem was?
Not knowing what to do, not knowing how to be calm, not knowing like how to manage my working memory, not knowing how to be organized. I mean, yeah, I'm organized. My room is perfect, spotless. Everything is in their spot, but not having a system to keep it there, right? Not knowing how to plan and prioritize. I would write 100 things down. I would go to a meeting. I would come out, and I had all these like 20, 30 of these. And I absolutely hate those. Those yellow
stickies.
No, well, first of all, there is those sticky notes in my office because I absolutely hate them. They're the worst thing for. I mean, okay, my opinion, for me, worse because you write it, it's unorganized, it falls off. By the way, Post-it, please fix it. The stickiness has gotten worse. It falls off and it loses. But those yellow pads that you write and you just flip them over,
right?
No organization. I would just write dates on it and stuff to do, and then just toss it on the table and paper will stack up. And next week, I couldn't find it. I would go get another notepad. And I would create a system. I would buy a software to help me become organized. And it didn't work. I mean, my support system a lot of times was my wife. Like, hey, let me call her and tell her, hey, can you remember? I mean, at one point I was a director. I was a manager. I was the face of the company representing a brand and working with big brands, right? Like, imagine the head of sales of school districts for LA comes to meet you from Apple and you missed the appointment because you decided that day to go and have fun. You know what I mean? Like, I literally would, like, even the calendar was there. I had 2 monitors. Like, system was in place, but I didn't know how to use it and how to utilize it.
What do you mean you didn't know how to use it or utilize it? Like, what do you mean? Like, you just like, I mean, you missed the notifications. You like how did you?
Let me tell you this. There's this great book, and I'm gonna give the props to the author, Russell Ramsey, and it's called. I forgot it's up there. I don't want to get up, but
it's okay.
It's a toolkit for ADHDers. The first page of the book, he has this great line in it. And he says, ADHD is not, and I'm going to paraphrase it, like I don't remember all the words, please. But I took this away from it. ADHD is not a lack of knowledge. We're actually very smart. Even the people that have executive function challenges, their IQs a lot of times are very high. I get parents when I'm working with their kid, is like, oh, he's not dumb. He's very smart. He's a high IQ, but he just doesn't apply himself and his grades are all over the place and he doesn't want to turn the homework in. I'm like, it's not that he doesn't want to work, man, he just forgets. It's not that he doesn't want to do good on the test. He has test anxiety. So long story short, the second paragraph says, you have knowledge, you have the tools. ADHD is a performance problem. You have the tools. You go and buy 500 apps on your phones to help you with organization, keeping you on track, keeping you with your diet and all that stuff. But it doesn't work because you don't follow through or you forget what to use. You don't create a system for yourself.
So how did you find out? Like, how did you start climbing out of this? Like, what were some methods that you used to kind of reorganize yourself or situate yourself to be a better
I
person?
think when I was in the IOP, before I went into the second time to the hospital, in the IOP, I went to another 72-hour hold. Let's put it that way.
And what's this? What's a 72-hour hold? Like, what is IOP
Like
exactly?
you have
Can you explain it?
suicidal ideation, and they put
Okay.
you. Yeah. I was going to IOP, outpatient program, to help with with depression and anxiety and stuff like that, stress. And I got labeled everything: bipolar, major depression, dual personality, a lot of stuff, right? It was I kept hitting rock bottom, and nobody would understand it. And I kept on asking, like, I need help with my ADHD. He's like, no, you need to deal this. And my therapist keeps saying, like, I know what's going on. Let's find a system. Nobody wanted to listen, right? And not here to talk about that. But long story short is I like, you have one of those moments that as an ADHD, you procrastinated with something for a long time. Now you want to do it, but it's the wrong moment. During one of the breaks, I went in the car, and you had only 30 minutes, and you had to come back in. If you didn't, they would, you would get kicked out, and then legally they could take you back into the 72-hour hold. I decided to follow up. You remember I told you in 2016, my therapist said, I don't know what else to do. We've done all the work. Now you need an executive function coach or a coach. I started looking for resources for my ADHD because they were not giving me the proper tool at this clinic. And I got a hold of this gentleman, which later on became one of my coaches, mentor coach, and my guidance. Can I share his name?
Sure.
Yeah, David Gurek. He's the he's the founder of ADCA, and they train coaches there. They train ADHD coaches. So he picked up the phone, and it was funny. I was looking for someone to help me. He picked up the phone, started talking to me, and they kept on knocking on my door windows, like, you got to come in. We're going to call the police on you. I'm like, I don't care. I'm talking to someone that is understanding me. For 1.5 hours, we're supposed to talk for 30 minutes. 1.5 hours, he validated everything. He understood what I was going through. And he says, look, I want to help you get a coach, but I'm going to bet you're going to become a coach. I'm like, are you kidding me? Go through education again? Didn't you hear me? I got an MBA. He's like, I had an MBA too. I used to work in marketing. And he told me his story. It related. I went back in. I became major depressed again. That's when the second hold happened. And after that, I came out. I think it was a couple of weeks later that I called the coach that he had told me to talk to. And that's when I met Sherry Cannon. She was my coach. She coached me for a good quite amount of time. And then I started getting, like, when I saw her style and the approach, I fell in love with the program. And I took the courses back to back to back. Sometimes I was taking two different courses at once, and graduated and started coaching right in the middle of it. And since then, it's been a different journey. It's been a wild one.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, you said a lot of stuff. You had, I think, like, a lot of things, like, you started thinking about were a lot about self-purpose. So you had a lot of issues with purpose in some sense. Drive, organization, and, self-hate. And it's like, I wonder where self-hate, when you dig down deep, where the self-hate actually started.
Self-hate? I was not normal. I was not like the other people around me.
What do you mean by
I
normal?
was compared to my cousins, my family members. Oh, why can't you act your age? Why are you acting like a 5-year-old? You're 19. Why do you go and play with 10-year-old kids? And they never saw that, hey, that's a strength that this guy has. He's a compassionate person. Like my dad's joke, like still hurts to this day. Oh, the night that he gets married, he's gonna go play with his G.I. Joe. Like they saw me being a pure adolescent and child that I just wanted to, I couldn't connect to the adults. And I would, like when I would connect with someone, I would sit down and talk philosophy. I would talk politics. I would talk about religion and stuff like that. But you had to find me the right person. That was my audience. That was willing to listen to an ADHDer, be a good monologuer and not interrupt them. And actually I did. Like I had a couple of mentors. He's passed away.
Do you think that you interrupt a lot of conversations? Do you think you're an interrupter?
I think I've gotten better at it. But back in the day, like my wife would tap me on my shoulder. My mom would yell at me. It was like, I would get coworkers mad. Because I would zone out. And of course, I would miss the whole conversation. I had a talk with someone a couple of weeks ago. And he's like, yeah, family were talking. And then I just started talking about golf. And it's funny, he could not remember what the conversation was, but he just thought, I'm like, did they talk about golf? He's like, I doubt it because they don't like golf. I'm like, did they talk about tea? And he started laughing. He's like, maybe they were talking about green tea. And I heard the word tea and I started thinking about golf. And that was the story of my life. I would go on tangents or I would skip to the bottom of the story. Again, this is like my greatness, right? As a processor, I could process information faster. And I would disassociate myself from the meeting or the interview or like whatever at work. And then I would go there and in my mind, I had processed it. I had come up with the answer and I would jump. I was like, hey, no, you're doing this wrong. This is what we do. And then they were like, oh, dude, you're like going on a tangent. I'm like, no, and I would get frustrated. They would get frustrated.
And when you say you would go on a tangent, what do you mean? Could you describe that a little bit?
I mean, I'm pretty sure if you listen to this conversation tomorrow, you'll see me going on tangents. I'll just like side stories, something that is more interesting. Kind of like I would forget what the conversation was, and I would just drive the person into another rabbit hole or another like totally different thing.
Oh, so you
and I are having a conversation about how your yesterday was, and you're talking to me. And then you would say, look, I went out with my friend. Yesterday was a hard day, but we went out to steak. I'm like, dude, you know what? When I got married, my wife took me to a steakhouse in Vegas, and it was, oh my. And then I would talk, ramble. And the person would look at me, he's like, dude, I'm talking about me. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah.
So you would switch it and make it about you.
In somewhat, not
but not willingly knowing,
like
not on purpose.
Selfish.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Totally. I get it. But you would just, you would, unconsciously just go into a whole nother conversation and you didn't realize, you didn't catch yourself. Hey, wait a minute. I just fucking went on a tangent about myself. Let me back up, dude. Chill out. Like, did you ever start figuring that out later? Like catching yourself like, hey, dude, chill the fuck out. Like you just went on a tangent and laugh at yourself.
Figuring out, I have these little terminologies that I come up with for myself. I call it banging my head on the steering wheel. I would go in the car and I would feel ashamed. When I started figuring out what ADHD is, when I started listening to podcasts and videos and my therapist would talk to me and I was like, I should have not said this. Why did I say that? Why did I go there? Oh my God, I made my coworkers feel miserable. I didn't follow through. And then I would like, well, I wouldn't hit it, but I would like you want to bang your head to the wall. It's like, oh my God, again, stop being so impulsive or stop, like, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's that I didn't have, Hallowell has this great theory. He says ADHD brains are like a Ferrari. And then when God was, or, the creator was creating us, he gave us no brakes or bicycle brake pads. Like we're not adequate with the right pause or the stopping tool. That's why we're impulsive. And I would crash and burn. I would say the wrong thing. I would like literally shoot myself in the foot. Oh man, like I don't want to even get into the dating life before I met my wife. I would go on dates and, oh, everything goes good. And then the person would run away. Like my cell phone would be blocked. never answer me.
What do you think you do how do you think that affect you in dating? Give me some examples.
Oh, I would like, now that I look at it, like I could see people like looking at me like they're scared. Like I would give them too much information, random stuff. I remember when I met my wife, we met at a party. And she was getting her bachelor's to become a therapist. She was getting a bachelor's in psychology. She looked at me and she was like, look, I'm a psychology major. I'm not going to judge you, but maybe you should not be telling everyone all this stuff.
Like, what were you doing?
I don't know, just random stuff. Like you're supposed to meet someone, and it wasn't a date. Like we were at a party you're trying to introduce yourself. You're trying to wow or impress the person, right? I didn't know, like small talk for me still as an adult ADHD sometimes is hard. Either I'm fully in and I give too much details and too much description and stuff like that. That's like when in coaching, like when I meet someone, it's kind of like a dating scene again for me. And I failed miserably at the first year until I got another coach for that. And he's like, dude, you need to chill out. Like you're just driving clients away from yourself because you're not even listening to what they're saying. And then I had to slow it down, become a better coach and learn to listen what the client wants and stuff like that. But I would just like, I get hyper, right? Like the client tells me a story. I'm like, yeah, I was like, I'm going to help you like this. So this is what happened to me, blah, 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 blah. And like, and then I got AI, of course. I have AI all over my computer. And I would time myself. I'm like, oh my God, I took 99% of the session and I was talking and the person talked only for 1%. So imagine in the dating world, that's what it was. As either Rooz was giving stuff that, and I would keep putting my foot in my mouth, like the wrong thing. You don't need to say this. You don't need to say that to impress the person.
Give us some.
I want to get married and have kids. And the person was like, dude, like, what the hell? Like, you just met me. Like, what's going on? We're just smoking a cigarette together. We're drinking. Just chill out.
I mean, here's the thing, right? I think you mentioned a lot of cool stuff, a lot of interesting stuff, and a lot of stuff to really dig down and reflect on. And my mom was like a mental psychologist and stuff like that, or at least worked at the mental place. And, I've said that before in the pod. And, and my stepdad, he was a practicing lawyer or whatever at the time too as well. And then my father was actually a musician. I learned a bunch of stuff, I learned a bunch of stuff. I learned a bunch of stuff from divorce. I learned a lot of stuff about people and, culture, so much stuff about being around so many rapid personalities. And I was always a people person. And I, even myself, I was diagnosed, with ADD or not ADHD, but I think now they've combined them together. But when I was
inattentive.
Yeah. But I think when I was a kid, I was diagnosed with that earlier on. But I don't think I didn't have like some of the problems that I hear some other people had. You
didn't have the hyperactivity.
Yeah, I didn't have the hyperactivity. As far as like planning, I think those things changed because I have like, typically when people have like, some type of like ADD or something else like that, they usually have some side thing attached to it. So maybe it's like OCD or something else like that. Mm-hmm. Or, sometimes people are diagnosed as like, ADD and they really are like slightly off the spectrum, or it could be both, I've seen different things like that. And so it's like, sometimes things can easily get misdiagnosed. Or sometimes people are just like, there was abuse in their family or some trauma happened in their family and they kind of turn on that switch, they turn on that switch to, permeate or imitate ADD, right? And then it might stick around until they figure out either try to switch it off or grow off, but it begins to be this mechanism to run to hide behind because it's a response from trauma, So I listened to one other guy, he was talking about this too as well. And I think it was a therapist or something like that. And he was talking about it too, about how he felt it was a trauma-based disorder, if you will. Or connection that happened earlier on in childhood where a child learned how to, that was their way to defend themselves against trauma, was to basically zone out, right? if you will. And I could probably say like, definitely zoning out, younger age, things like that happen. I think my father passed away when I was a kid. So, things like that, when you hear people arguing, you kind of want to run away into this little box. And sometimes you can learn how to do that in your head. You can go to this imaginary world that you can create. But I think like inherently, personally for myself, I think like I was always just like interested in solving problems, human problems. And so, and then I was always really aware of myself. So when I noticed I did something wrong or something wasn't normal or it was on average, I didn't actually contribute those things to just, oh, well, that's ADD or that's this. Some of those things were just my personality. Some of those things I just picked up from people or environments. And I learned how to manage them, right? And sometimes based off of my surroundings, those things changed, right? I think they say like, you're the average of the 5 most people you hang out with the most. And usually if you want to be your better self, you typically want to try to hang around people who can help you do that. Because you end up being a product of your environment, right? Of anything, right? So I think like some things like that also help. The power, I think probably my biggest things were focus. Focus. And what I mean by focus, I mean like focusing on one thing and not being able to not do so many different things pretty well than the average human being. I think those are some of the problems I had. I was always just good at so many different things and I could easily switch to them. And it was just like focusing on doing one thing was really hard. And accomplishing goals, I think those were really hard too as well for me. And when how I actually figured out how to actually bypass that was when I discovered the law of writing. Because I kind of gamified the law of writing, right? So I looked at things of like, all right, so I have this, these pads, right? I'll have them. And then I'll just like write down goals. I'll write down holistic goals, right? What are the goals that I want to, achieve for maybe it's, within a year or maybe it's within, 5 years. Those are your big holistic goals, whatever it may be. And then what are my daily goals to get there? And then be able to then aim for those goals and gamify that to try to conquer them like it's a video game to make sure that I try to get those done. And if I didn't reach everything during that week, I would rotate those to the following week and scratch those off. But I would scratch those off. I would line each one off. So it was like a race, pushing my dopamine to give me like a dopamine rush to be like, all right, well, I got to conquer these things. Oh, I didn't finish this one. So it would irritate me if I didn't finish one. But then I learned to just like, okay, anyone that you don't actually finish, rotate it to the following week, but always prioritize what you feel is going to be essential for the goal.
But Tav, if you realize you did one of the things that a lot of ADHDers that at least I know or I've worked with, they have a hard time doing is writing, right? Even as someone that has ADHD, I remember when I was in 7th or 8th grade, my uncle was like, oh, you got to write goals down. For many years, I didn't write. And when I started writing, when I came out of the hospital, the first day, literally, I took a bullet journal. I should have kept it because it would have bring so much memories back. And the therapist is sitting there, she was like, yeah, you need to only do one thing a day. Don't write down anything more than that. And I just wrote 3 pages of goals that I had for that week. But you know what happened is I literally felt a switch turn off. It was these complete anxiety. I'm trying to remember that state of mind. First of all, I heard a lot of voices turning off. And those voices by myself, like I'm not schizophrenic or something. It was like, remember this, remember that. Like, like I had a friend who was like, oh, dude, if I keep writing stuff on my hand, I'll turn into a guy that has all these tattoos on his hands. Like, just where do I write it? And that was creating anxiety and stress for me. Right. And all these goals that are here, and then you would feel crap about it because you didn't achieve anything. Right. Now, it took many trial and errors. We're in 2024. Since 2019, I've changed so many different methods. I probably spent over a couple $1,000s on tools and stuff like that. But one thing that I did since last year, and I kept the last book, I said, if you write at least for 1 year, every day, what you want to do. Now, I'm not going to say it was perfect. There was months that I would literally not write. But you know what? When I would go back that month, if I didn't make enough money, if everything was all shattered and scattered and stuff like that, oh God, I forgot to write goals down. And it was just like so life changing. But then you have people that you're like trying to give them the tool and they're not ready for it. Like, I don't write anything. It's just a piece of paper. I'm like, it's not. You think it's a piece of paper because, you're looking at the physical, like, the physics of it. Yeah, it is. Physically, it is. But you're trying to keep information in here. And I can see them. They're trying to process stuff with you. And they're like, I forgot. What? I'm like, dude, your brain, with all due respect, your brain is scattered. It's all over. Like, if I turn this video around and you look at yourself, you can see it. But they have a very hard time. They're not ready for that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I do totally understand what you're saying 100%. I do get that 100%. And I think I think when I looked at things more like in the high school era and during that time in elementary school, I think I just drifted upon things. I didn't really care. And my goal was like, oh, I just want to do this. So it doesn't matter. I won't need this. So I didn't really care. I didn't really think too hard of this. But I remember my report cards, my teachers writing in elementary school, oh, he's a dreamer. He just looks at this, he just looks at the stars and just is, thinking. And, I think you find these in a lot of successful entrepreneurs or CEOs who just look at the stars. And I think for me, I was just for me personally, I think I was just bored. I was bored and I was trying to think of bigger things. And I just really didn't really take on a lot of things that were in school. I would always rethink, well, why do you need this? And why does this exist? And how can this be better? And who said this before? And who told us that this is the correct way? So you came up with 1 + 1 = 2. Well, who came up with that? And how do we know that's absolutely true? So this is where my brain would just go wild of literally doing this anytime I learned something. And so pretty much I would use a lot of first principle thinking when it came to understanding things. So once I used first principle thinking, I could always just take off and just do things at a high level. So if there was something like, okay, well, like when I was like, all right, well, I'm going to take a film class and I'm going to learn how to do production, but I need to learn how to edit and do some other little things in there. So I was like, all right, well, what are the primary things that I need to be able to do in order to start? And the rest I should be able to figure out myself. These are the things this is kind of like what I would look for. So I would, join a class, learn the basic fundamentals. And probably the 5th class, I was like, all right, well, I don't need to come to class anymore because I figured out the rest myself. And then I would come back to the class and I would show the class my projects. And they're like, well, how the hell did you do all this? I was like, well, I just need to learn the first principles because that's all it takes for me to really understand something. I really just picked up things by understanding the first principles. And that's how my brain thinks still to this day is I look at things. What are the basic fundamentals of whatever makes something works? And once I understand that, then I feel like I have enough to go out there and spread my wings and I could just go past the average individual. And I think there's something that they call, hyper focus with ADD people. And I know that I have this. So what I try to do with that is, I try to manipulate or put myself in situations of things that I'm super passionate about, or find ways for me to be super passionate or curious about. So that way I can overachieve everybody within that space. And that's one of my superpowers. I don't really look at ADD as necessarily a negative 100%, but I don't look at it as a positive. I feel like everybody has these pros and cons and we're all broken humans. And it's just like, how do we find balance? How do we find compassion? How do we find time for ourselves? How do we get out of our own ways? How do we stop thinking that we're so important? How do we stop feeling pain? How do we try to navigate throughout this life and permeate love? And I think having people that are variant makes the world awesome. So having people out there like you, Rooz, makes the world awesome because it's kind of boring if there's just everybody's just like, me or the guy down the street. So, I think you as an individual, I think you are a character. So I think you have a unique personality. And I think the universe, God puts you here for a reason and to, provide that type of energy to other people that they don't have. Now, are there things that could be fine tuned a little bit? We all have that, right? And that's what life's about. Sometimes we can learn more things about ourselves and enhance our superpowers, that might have been a little bit taken negatively. We can learn from those and figure out how to fine tune them and make them more positive. And I think you don't have a problem that's so oh my God, this and this. I think there's sometimes you just might get in your way.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, you understand it. You won't look at it as a threat. You understand it because you lived it. When a neurotypical, when a person that doesn't have ADHD or is not, I mean, I've had people that they have ADHD themselves. They don't want to. I mean, they're parents, let's say, and I'm not judging any parent because I'm a parent myself. There's moments absolutely that I want to go in the bathroom and just crack everything. I'm like, oh my God, why is this kid doing this? But then I'm like, come on, man. Like, 6 years old, probably her executive function is at 4 or 3 years old. Like, she doesn't know how to regulate her emotions. She doesn't know how to stay calm. And she tells you, like, I don't know how to stop crying. I'm like, no, well, stop. I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that. You need to teach them how. And I don't, like, right? So it's not like now, you understand it. You don't look at it as a threat. I've worked with people, like, a lot of when I started, my goal was to help people with MBAs, midlife managers, help them succeed. I still work with them, but I love working with kids. Not every kid, I'll be honest. It's some of them. Some kids are like, I'm like, I just can't have 5 kids in one day and then expect to be with my own kid at the end of the night. But some of them, I feel so bad because they're asking for help or they don't know how to ask for help. And sometimes parents don't understand them and they just label, like, he's just lazy. He just wants to play video games. I'm like, no, video games are more stimulating. But you can't live like that. And I'm like, okay, with all the respect, go tell that to the person that is addicted, right? Well, so they're addicted to video games in a different way. They're getting dopamine. They're in control. They're playing Call of Duty or blah, blah, blah. And first of all, if they lose, they can respawn. And they're seeing achievements there. But that achievement is nothing. It's just a badge. I'm like, yeah, but they see it right there. You're telling me to go and study to get a good grade. So in my future, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but instant gratification, right? Immediate results. And that's why when I work with ADHDers, I'm like, dude, you don't have to go to college. You don't have to, like, you need some kind of education to get you in some kind of, like, we know high school, you don't need to have high school, right? But you can go and get a career in carpentering. It's become a welder. I have one client right now, he wants to be a gunsmith. I'm like, he knows guns ins and out, this kid. And we're like, why not? My parents like, what does he want to do? He wants to go work at Turner Sports. I'm like, what's wrong with working at Turner Sports? Let him be great at it. We don't know what's going to happen. It's just, you got to let them explore. Well, what if he fails? I'm like, well, then he's going to learn and he's going to move on.
Well, here's one thing too that I always try to also chime into as well. When it's any individual, because I get a lot of people that come up to me asking me for, like, financial or, career paths and et cetera, especially, younger adults who just, are about to go into college and things like that. And so they always reach out to me and ask me a bunch of questions about themselves and their careers and what they should do and et cetera. And I like to take it on for free, whenever I get the chance. I feel like it's just paying back, right? I mean, giving back a little bit. But what was I going to say? I was going to chime on that. I think, like, sometimes, what I like to do is I like to look at what people are good at and see where that can fit into the future of things. So, for example, let's say, one of your, clients, maybe they like playing with guns and they're an ADD type of person, right? Background. Then I look for, okay, well, how can I trigger something that might be good for them, that might, encourage their hyper focus and help them be successful into what they might love already. And if maybe they might be more, how would you say? Maybe they might be more prone to be successful in something doing guns, but also that could be done in a way to where it's beneficial for their career. For example, maybe they like guns and, there's AI robots that, need to be able to build guns. Maybe there's some type of military programs that need better guns. Maybe they can invent better guns, but they can work for some type of technology company where they can work on guns or better machines within the guns. And they know so much, knowledge about that. Maybe they can make a better gun, et cetera. But maybe they have to first start working for a company in the military or something else like that, where they can have like some type of solid background and still be able to do what they love and make a solid living. Because I think that's always the trick for most parents is most parents want to make sure their kids are able to survive. They don't really care about what career they're doing. It's like, can you survive with that stuff? You know, excuse my French. Can you survive with that? Like, you know, are you going to be a homeless on the street because you're playing around in this Jimmy shop? And the way things are going right now, you know, in my tech sector with, you know, machine learning and AI and things like that, large language models, is that a lot of things are changing. Right. And what I mean by a lot of things are changing or going to be changing dramatically in the next, 5 years. And so even when we start talking about who's going to repair guns and who's going to work in stores, those jobs are kind of dangerous in a way, because we're on the path where a lot of the mundane roles won't even exist. And furthermore, all jobs most likely from the path that we're looking at right now might possibly just totally won't exist at all. So then we're all relying on what? We're all relying on machines. And then it's like, I think Elon posted something like this the other day where he was basically talking about, we have to prepare for this. But, one of the biggest problems that we're going to have to try to figure out with AI and the machines and et cetera coming up in the future is, what will people do when they don't have a job? What will be their purpose? Because a lot of people tie their job or position or career as their purpose. And I think that's something that we've got to start thinking about inherently. So if we're not finding things that we're happy about internally with ourselves first, self-happiness, love is the most biggest thing that you got to have before you can do anything. You can't make anyone else happy if you don't love yourself first. And I think we teach people so much about, finding your career, finding other things to put off the real issue. What is inside? Do we know how to love, and do we know how to permeate that out to other people? And, are we content with ourselves first? But we got to be content with ourselves first. If we're not content with ourselves, we don't love, Rooz, we don't love Tav, then guess what we're going to do? We think that we're going to permeate love. We're going to permeate this negative energy subconsciously. People are going to feel it, and people are going to feel uneasy, and it's like, even you mentioned to me earlier, you were like, hey, when I would meet girls, and this is just an example, I understand. You were like, hey, I want to have a family. I want to have kids and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, and you kind of felt like, oh, wait, why is everybody walking away from me every time I do this? And it might not register you exactly immediately why, but it's just like, I think sometimes that people get overwhelmed, because maybe they didn't even think about that type of stuff, or maybe that's too much for them. And maybe you were just thinking a lot more forward about your passions and dreams and wishes, and you were just more expressive about those things. But somebody else could take that in a way to where that's just too much. That's too much. I'm even thinking about that yet, bro.
I didn't know how to put it together. Scattered mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything was over there. Like right now you were talking, and I just wanted to do fact check because, short-term memory, sometimes I misquote.
It's okay.
But the owner of JetBlue, David Neeleman, very talk about his ADHD, proud. He said in 2002 he was diagnosed. The guy is the inventor of the electronic ticket software or the system.
Yeah.
He was always late to meetings because he was misplacing the electronic ticket. Did you ever watch, I'm bad with names, but Tom Cruise played a movie, I think it was called, it was about bars and he wanted to have, he was a bartender. It was a long time ago. But he's like, look at that guy. Cocktail, right? And there's a scene that he's talking about this shoelace and the guy that invented that little plastic that goes at the end of the shoelace, right? And he's a billionaire and they're angry about it. Like he just wants to be that guy that is a creator, right? A lot of ADHDers have that idea, that goal, which I've learned, first off, it gives them the dopamine. It gives them the good feeling. Oh, I'm going to go do this. But when it comes to doing it, it's boring, or they forget, or the process, it has a lot. And we're not great at following directions or processing and stuff like that. Look, the guy used to lose his tickets, and he's like, oh, I'm going to go get an electronic ticket. I mean, it's funny. You go ask kids that are used to the internet age and era, like, how did you guys fly before this? I'm like, paper tickets. I still have my paper ticket. The last one that I got, like physical.
That's pretty rad.
Keep it as a yeah, it's like a real paper that was mailed to us.
I don't know. I think one thing too that you mentioned too that I wanted to highlight as well, Rooz, is you mentioned, you said this a couple of times about the dopamine rush and et cetera in the video games. And, something I wanted to highlight off of that is just like, and I'm sure you know this as well, is that a lot of people who have, levels of variant rates of extreme to whatever mild cases of ADD in some sense, they have dopamine is what kind of drives them, right? And they kind of get addicted to it more than I think the average person does. And that dopamine rush is something that, we chase religiously, if you will. It's kind of like this, it would also causes a lot of, how would they say, causes a lot of impulsiveness, right? Because you're just chasing that, I need that dopamine rush really fast, right? So typically you'll see them like, we'll goggle down the energy drinks. Anything that pushes that dopamine. And of course, there's probably some who, go to drugs because, drugs can do that too as well. So some people do that to subset or kind of offset that dopamine, balance, if you will. But I think like that dopamine thing is a really bad thing for society in general, because there's so many things that can confuse or distract us and trigger those things. And like, that's one of the things that I do in design when I'm also designing platforms for technology companies is, I'm, looking for indicators and triggers to motivate people's dopamine rush. So to gamify design or interfaces, digital interfaces in general, but always thinking about how, we can put a dopamine rush within the experience. And a lot of people don't realize that exactly when they use these platforms or these tools, but that is what we do. We design them to do that, to other people, but it can be helpful to people in some short way, I guess, maybe, but not really in the long term, because it kind of makes people distracted easily.
It is, but you gotta, like, right now you're talking about this, and just like I'm having a epiphany moment, like I'm thinking about a client. Mom and dad has shamed him so much about video games, and he's great at it. He makes videos and stuff like that. He can sell it. I keep trying to see if he's interested in getting. No, I don't want to get into video games. No, I'm like, oh, why? And he's like, oh, I don't want to do the design. I'm like, dude, you're enjoying the product. You know the ins and out of it. And there's not only one section, right? There's the design, there's the bugging, there's the storyteller, right? I had a client that worked in the industry, just without getting too much details, but he was a scriptwriter for big games. And if you're great at finding loopholes and bugs and, like this, but that person is shamed constantly so much that they're not even willing to peek their head out, and they get into that wrong job, the wrong field, the wrong.
I mean, hey man, like I remember I was, people were telling me, oh, you love computers, and I'm like, I love a lot of different things. I love to invent things, I like to make things, I like to create things. I can play 7 different instruments, and I learned them all by ear. But it's just like people say, oh, you should do computers. And I was like, dude, I don't see myself doing computers, buddy. Sorry. And, one time in high school, my senior year, I took a computer science class, and I fucking failed it miserably. Like I was like, I don't get this how the circuits work. I don't get how these, I don't get how any of this circuitry works. This is weird. Like, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to that fashion merchandise class where all the girls are.
I wanted to become a chemical engineer, but in high school in Iran, I liked the fact that I was going to be in the lab, and I thought I'm going to be that mad scientist, that I'm going to create something. Like later on when I grew up, not that I say what happened in Breaking Bad was cool, but like there were moments in there like, that's what I wanted. Not to create crystal meth or something like that. Like I just wanted to be that mad scientist that's making stuff, and like having that whole Erlenmeyer, the flask, everything, all that stuff in my house, microscope, cutting stuff open. But when it came to going into chemistry, taking Chem 101, okay, Chem 102, well, the rest of them, I just failed miserably. Because the concept of sitting there and doing theory was not my thing.
Right, because those things can get really mundane and boring, and they don't necessarily mean that you exactly can achieve the actual goal. I mean, there's a lot of people who do a lot of things in unorthodox ways. I mean, I think Einstein had a lot of problems himself with, college and school and stuff like that. I think he failed a bunch of stuff too as well. So it's not uncommon for this to happen. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who have like, I think you have to have sometimes a little bit of oddness, if you will, to be a genius, right? I think geniuses are odd, and you just have to be oddly odd in the right thing to be noticed as a genius.
Now we're talking about academia, we're talking about scientists, but if you Google famous ADHDers, there's musicians, there's athletes. I've known a couple NFL players. I mean, they're out there. They're out there. Movie stars.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a problem of finding shortages of people who have ADHD or ADD, whatever you want to call it. I think the problem is, I mean, there's people with autism who are, who are the richest people in the world, who are billionaires. You look at your Elon Musk. I'm going to probably throw out maybe Zuckerberg is probably autistic, mildly on the spectrum. Actually, to be honest with you, here in Silicon Valley, I would probably say that most of your billionaire CEOs or the people in tech are probably mildly autistic in some way. The top people, I would definitely probably put that in there. That might be an over examination, but I will tell you, a lot of people here in Silicon Valley have autistic tendencies, and it's just like,
well, they hyper focus. They're the person that doesn't give up. But again, they learn. I have this theory that I talk to kids. I'm like, did you ever watch the X-Men? Some say yes. I'm like, do you remember Cyclops? His big challenge is that laser eye. All his life, his parents put a little bandage all over his eyes because when he would take it off, he would be shooting all over the place. Dr. Xavier finds the glasses that gives him the right tool to hone in. And he can dial it. He can make it small. He can make it big. It's still a weapon. It's still doing what it needs to do, but he's using it in his powers. He's using it in his benefit.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to say is it's not about being rich. It's like I tell them, like, oh, I want to do this. I'm like, dude, put money out of the equation. Because when I became a coach, I did not have a vision, and I'm not rich. I'm just saying it wasn't about money. It's about what's going to make me happy. Whatever you want to do in life, when people tell me, like, take money out. Oh, I can't. I'm like, just listen for 1 second. Take money out of the equation and do what you want to do to be happy.
I think a lot of people find it hard to do that in these days and times, and specifically because of a lot of things that we design to increase dopamine, right, and shape people's minds. For example, like Instagram, when we play with the algorithm, and then we gamify it and make you want to tap on likes. We want to make you comment with CTAs. We want to make you see these images that we're going to push in the algorithm to show you somebody's nice new car and a new vacation. It's really hard for people, I think, these days, especially young adults, to really sit down and say, well, hey, I'll just be that great, painter that just paints some houses for a living, A lot of people don't want to do that unless you pretty much grew up in a small town or a small village or something else like that. It's really hard to get the, today's people to sit down and really want to do that. Everybody wants to be rich. Everybody wants to be Elon Musk. Everybody wants to be famous. Everybody wants to be a YouTuber. I mean, like even the other guy that you were talking about that you were coaching who's doing the games. I mean, he could build the games, design the games, but you know what? These days you can just go and be a YouTuber and make millions just off of streaming the YouTube using like games and stuff like that and playing those. There's like a bunch of people that do that worldwide, actually more than any other thing predominantly, right?
Why do so many people want to be that? And I'm not saying not to, but why do so many people want to do that and they fail miserably?
I think the ones that fail miserably is because either two things. One, they don't have the actual skill set to actually make it as high, or I would say the other would be because they're not as passionate about it.
There's one more. Do the mundane thing. You got to be consistent.
Oh, consistency is big. Resilience.
Every day.
Yep.
You got to do what everybody hates. Like if you're doing sales cold call every day, you got to make those calls. You got to, like, if you don't follow the formula for success, and that's what is hard for ADHD, right? I work with people in real estate. A lot of ADHDers are in real estate, right? They got to call cold calls. A lot of coaches are ADHD, and they're not. And I'm not doing. I'm like, I'm great. But I'm great at what I do because I follow the script that my coach gave me. You got to do the stuff that is boring. Well, how? Well, first you learn how to walk. You got to learn how to walk. I mean, I tell people like when you were born, did you know how to get on a bicycle? Did you do the Tour de France? No, you failed miserably. You didn't even know how to crawl. You learn crawl and turn over, all that stuff, and then, but you didn't get on the bike to be Lance Armstrong, or I mean, I don't know who the newest idol in bike, bicycle is. Or I'm just using it as it was not about winning. It was about enjoying it. That's what I'm saying is enjoy. Go find a way to enjoy it, right? Find a way to enjoy life, enjoy what makes you happy. And then when you find that, and you start doing it. I have musicians that I work with. Oh, I can't make money because everybody says, I'm like, stop listening to the voices around you. Because like Metallica, Slash, Guns N' Roses, the guys that didn't give up were the guys that, if you read their histories, they're beaten up, they were thrown out, but they didn't give up.
No, you're 100% right. I mean, Kurt Cobain himself said, he lived under a bridge and, he struggled. But I think there's a problem as well. It's like there's so many people that, try to do those things and they were resilient for years and most of them won't make it. And that's just the reality of, the world. But, I know so many people that were musicians and now they're not musicians at all. And they were resilient as possible. But, it's like, what happens? Like, I remember this one girl that she used to work for me, and she was like, oh, I want to be a singer. I want to be a singer. She always says she wanted to be a singer. And she was resilient, but she was also, you could also say that she also was doing other things in order to make sure she was staying afloat. So she was doing like different acting gigs and things like that at the same time. But, her whole goal, was always to be a singer. And I would, bring her on my red carpets in LA. And eventually, I left LA and moved up here to Silicon Valley, Northern California. And when I left, she got on one of these apps and the app kind of blew up and she started hanging around some other people in NoHo. And then she got, I guess you would say, viral. And so ever since then, she's been making a living from social media. But she can never, for the life of it, transfer over to the music space. And I've seen her try it a couple of times. Even with all her clout of, 10 million followers and stuff like that, she still can't transfer over, even though she's passionate about it. It's just like some people have to also realize that if something's just not going to work and it's just not their path. That's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. Goal,
right. Like they like one failure of one goal didn't stop it. She's still doing it. Even though she's never going to be a singer, that didn't become a downfall that, hey, I'm going to shut down every door because I didn't become a musician. I'm just going to sit home and not do anything.
Yeah, I think you have to find, one of the things I try to say is like, you have to find where you're getting a positive signal and then double down. And sometimes it may be harder for people if they don't get that immediately to double down because they're like, oh, wait, I tried it a couple of times and nothing happened. So I'm not passionate about it.
Yeah.
And it may take you 100 times or 300 times for you to actually get to that point to get a positive signal before you can double down. I mean, you look at the guy who created NVIDIA, they started at 30 something years ago, roughly. And now the company's just now the biggest company on earth. It's like 3 trillion. It's bigger than Apple.
Yeah.
But Apple's been there. Apple's been the big guy or the big machine on, in tech for 40 years? So,
yeah.
Everybody, it's something I like to say to people too as well. If you just keep on with persistence, and sometimes it's really about knowing the right thing to work on. And I think that's hard, but sometimes you can get lucky. You can get lucky if you're persistent with the right thing, because you can be persistent with the wrong thing and never make anything of it. It's really just like, you have to be paying attention to things. And some people have the patience and they just keep on going and it works out. Some people have don't have the patience and they might've made it, but they stopped. Mm-hmm. And you don't ever know which one that is. And that's always the trick. And you can say you can believe in yourself, but I think a lot of people believed in themselves, but some people it just works out. But I do agree 100% that most of the time what I see is that most people, when it doesn't work out, it really has to do with, resilience, persistence. But I'll be the one to say first off, hey, look, I didn't fucking try hard to do that. I just couldn't do it. I got bored. I just couldn't do it. I will raise my hand when I'm not interested and passionate about something, and I know I might have screwed something up. I'll call myself out. I'm not afraid to call myself out and say, oh, you know what? I could have did this. I could have did this better. But you know what? I just got bored of it, and I just didn't like it anymore. And, not passionate about it. But you got to find something that you're passionate about. And I think sometimes you have to try different things in order to do that sometimes. Because sometimes there's things that you might be passionate about that you might not even know. And I think that's a big thing. A lot of people don't know. Like there's tons of kids that are walking around like zombies. Like you ask them like, hey, why did you go to school for this? Well, I don't know. I mean, just, my parents and my uncle was, an engineer. So they told me I need to be an engineer. My mom, my family. It's like, okay, but what about you? What do you want to do? Well, I don't really know, actually. Well, how are you going to figure it out? Well, I don't know. I'm just going to be an engineer because my parents. Then they get to school and then they realize they suck. They graduate and they suck and they hate it. And so like, oh God, what do? I want to do something else. And they don't know what to do, but they need to make money. Or they finish the degree and then they get out and start working in it and they don't make any money. And so they're like, well, this is not going to work. I see my friends going to Bali, and they're in Bahrain and every place like that and other places they can't pronounce. And they're like, shoot, what am I doing right here? I'm doing the wrong thing. I need to find something else. This is not working. Because I've found a lot of people, even in my space, they were architects. They went to school to be architects, and then they couldn't make money in architecture. And so then they said, okay, well, what else can we do that's close enough? Or where can I get another job at? And they'll try to switch to technology, designing the platforms because they have an interaction background. So I've seen that a lot. It's interesting. It's really interesting. But I don't know. I think ADD is interesting. I think any type of like neurological disorder, quote unquote disorder, is interesting. But I like to think of things as like it's a superpower. But at some point, even a superpower can have a weakness. Everything has a pro and con. So even if your brain is, supposedly quote unquote normal, you might not be able to focus as hard as a person who has hyperfocus. So there's pros and cons to this, or you might be more risk averse. You might not say, oh, I'm not going to take a risk because I'm always so careful and I'm always so intelligent that I don't want to take a risk. And so, that person who doesn't take a risk is also the person who does not usually win. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Sorry, I got a client in like 5 minutes. I'm already late. We were booked till 1:00, weren't we?
Did we go past it? We might have went past it. We might have ADD'd past it. We might have ADD'd Rooz. Did we ADD past it?
Well, mine came up. I had a little music that played in the.
No, it's 1 p.m. You're right. No, I mean sometimes we do go over with a little grace period time, but yeah, it was great having you on. I don't want to make you miss your booking time. I think we had a little solid conversation.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Thank you. But you should do some podcasting, man. I think you'd be good at it. You have like a really calm presence.
I have the tools, but I never got into it. And I rather be guest. I rather go into people's programs and help them and just tell them, give them, tools or stuff, whatever they're looking for, and just help them out that way. Again, see, I don't have to do everything myself. I tell people, like, just because I know how to change my car oil, I'm not going to do it. First of all, I don't fit in underneath my car a little bit. I'm, not that skinny anymore. I'll take it to Jeff Lube, $30, $40. They'll do it in 5 minutes, and I'm not going to script the, I don't know, the bolt or anything. They're experts in it, right? You don't have to do everything yourself. Right.
Well, yeah, man, I totally get it. I think, in closing, we all have to manage our balances. And I would like to say probably one thing that helped me manage things a little bit better is I'd read this one book. It was called The Laws of Thinking. And once I read that book, it wasn't specifically directed for people who have ADD, but it was almost like almost similar to Secret, but it mentioned a lot of principles that I think I wasn't following at the time, like the law of distractions, talking about how you can get distracted by things. And sometimes people get, distracted by, saying that they're doing business or they have to conduct business, but they're just conducting busyness. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think a lot of those things resonate. But anyways, Are there any things you want to leave off saying, or any links or any type of things you want to mention before you get off?
No, if anybody ever wants to, I mean, I do free intake calls and meet and greets, and I might not be the coach, but we have resources. I give free resources. I help out as much as I can, and I'm here to help. I love working with every age group, gender, none of that matters. But you need my help, I'm here for you. Website is www.heal-thrive. So HEAL-THRIVE.com. And then you can go there, find a time to book, and just get a hold of us, and we're here to help you out.
Awesome, Rooz. Well, thank you for having on the pod. It's been amazing. I'm going to grab a sandwich, and you're going to catch that meeting. How about that?
Appreciate it.
All right, we're going to stand for a second and make sure we let it.
Ladies and gentlemen,
The Kids in the Room Podcast. Kids in the Room Podcast.
That's right. That's right.
Brought to you by Move Faces TV. Let's go.